Our story begins with a legend about the ancient Greek gods. It says that from ancient times, there were mythical creatures called Titans. These Titans were the rulers of the universe, but their reign ended when their children rebelled against them. These disobedient children created a giant monster called the Kraken, and through it, they were able to defeat their father and imprison him in Tartarus. Then, they divided the rule among themselves and became gods. Zeus ruled the sky from his fortress, and his brother Hades was banished to the underworld to rule there. Poseidon became the king of the sea. Zeus created humans in his image so that they would worship him and give him eternal life. However, humans eventually grew tired of these Greek gods and rebelled against them. At this time, a fisherman in the ocean, with his simple boat, had not caught anything in days. Suddenly, he found a coffin floating in the water. When he opened it, he found the body of a woman and a small child who was still alive. He couldn't understand how the child was alive despite the lack of oxygen inside the box. The kind fisherman decided to raise the boy as his own son. Years passed, and the boy grew up under the care of the fisherman and his wife. They also had a daughter. The boy grew into a strong and handsome young man named Perseus, and he worked with his father fishing. Perseus did not believe in Zeus and saw him as an unjust god. He felt that Zeus had brought them much suffering, and they couldn't catch any fish. But his father was a devout believer in Zeus. One day, they arrived at a city called Argos, where they saw a huge statue of Zeus standing proudly overlooking the sea. But Perseus's father felt that a disaster was about to happen. They saw a group of soldiers breaking the statue from its base, and it fell from the cliff into the water. Because of its size, it created huge waves. The soldiers were overjoyed and cheered, but suddenly the sky turned black, and flying creatures emerged from the sea. They attacked the soldiers who had destroyed the statue and defied the gods. The soldiers tried to resist, but these creatures were much stronger and killed them one by one quickly. The strangest thing was that after that, these creatures began to merge and combine, and suddenly Hades himself appeared. When he spotted the boat with Perseus and his family, he attacked it, and the boat sank into the water. Perseus managed to escape, but his family was trapped inside the sinking boat. He tried to save them, but he couldn't, and he watched his family drown before him, helpless. On the other hand, Zeus was annoyed that humans had rebelled against the gods, and he decided to punish them for betraying his love for them. Hades arrived at Olympus, Zeus's seat of power, and urged Zeus to take revenge on the humans who had destroyed his statue. He told him to let him handle them, and he would punish them, especially the people of Argos, because they had truly gone too far. He said that the gods needed human prayers to remain strong, and at this rate, they wouldn't find anyone to worship them. And remember, it's all nonsense, my friend. Anyway, Zeus agreed to Hades's plan, who believed that humans must be afraid to appreciate the blessings they had in return to worship him. At that time, the soldiers of Argos rescued Perseus from the water and took him with them to the city. When they arrived at the palace, they announced that they had succeeded in their rebellion and had destroyed Zeus's statue. Even though they had lost a lot, they felt they had won. On that day, King Cepheus held a big celebration and said that they were entering a new era and that the gods would no longer control the fate of humans. The only one who still believed in the gods in the palace at that time was Andromeda, the king's daughter. She tried to warn them against arrogance and that what they had done would have great consequences, and the gods would not remain silent. But they mocked her words and laughed, telling her that the gods' role was over, and from today, they were the gods. Suddenly, the light in the hall began to dim, and thick black smoke appeared, swirling in the middle. This smoke began to pull all the soldiers towards it, lifting them one by one into the air and swallowing them. Perseus was the only one who managed to stay on the ground and was not pulled away. A little later, the smoke turned into Hades, who was surprised that Perseus had managed to resist his power. Hades then looked towards the queen, flew towards her, sucked her life out, and turned her into a corpse in seconds. He announced that because they were defying the gods, he would unleash the Kraken on the city in 10 days. On that day, there would be a solar eclipse. He told them that the only solution for their salvation was to sacrifice the king's daughter, the princess, to the Kraken to atone for their sin of insulting the gods. Before he left, he looked at Perseus and greeted him, revealing that he was Zeus's son. This led the soldiers to arrest Perseus, and their leader, Draco, began to torture him to find out how to break this curse. They asked him to pray to Zeus to help them, but Perseus had no idea how to break the curse, and he refused to pray to Zeus because he didn't like the gods at all. He said that he actually wanted to take revenge on them because they had killed his family. In the end, he was imprisoned for a while and received a visit from someone he had never seen before named Io, who was about 1,000 years old or something. We learn that one of Zeus's brothers loved her and asked her to marry him, but she refused him, so he cursed her not to age and to remain as she was forever. Io knew everything about Perseus's past and assured him that he was destined for greatness. She told him that many years ago, there was a king named Acrisius who tried to rebel against the gods and was so arrogant about his power that he attacked Mount Olympus. Instead of destroying his army, Zeus decided to punish him more terribly. Zeus disguised himself as Acrisius and entered the queen's chambers as if he were her husband, and they had sexual relations. When the king returned to his wife, it was too late, and she was pregnant. So he ordered the killing of his wife and the child, who was Zeus's son. They put him in a coffin and took him to the top of a mountain, but before he could throw the coffin, Zeus struck him with a lightning bolt that turned him into a hideous monster, and he was condemned to live in torment forever. We return to Io, who tells Perseus that she was the one who saved him and moved the coffin to the fisherman who raised him. She tells him that his power as the son of a god is what will enable him to kill the Kraken, and if the monster dies, Hades will weaken because the Kraken is made from Hades' own body. Perseus decided to help and joined the soldiers led by Draco to kill the Kraken and avenge his family. They planned to go to the Stygian witches, 3 sisters who were the only ones who knew how to kill the Kraken. On the other hand, Hades went to King Acrisius, who was an outcast living in the sewers. He learned that Zeus's son, whom he had fathered with his wife, was still alive and offered him power for revenge and to kill Perseus. Of course, Acrisius agreed without hesitation, so Hades infused him with immense evil power and promised that he would defeat Zeus if he could kill his son. At that time, Perseus and the soldiers reached a forest and rested to continue their journey. Draco decided to train Perseus because he saw him as just a weak fisherman who couldn't even help himself. But he was shocked to find that even though Perseus had never held a sword before, he was very skilled through an unknown power and easily defeated and subdued Draco. On that beautiful day, everyone slept except Perseus, who heard a sound in the forest and went towards it. Draco was also disturbed and awake, watching Perseus. Perseus kept walking until a legendary sword appeared before him, a gift from Zeus to help him in his mission. But Perseus refused any gift from Zeus. Draco advised him to accept the gift because it would surely help him, but he refused. So Draco told him, "Anyway, I'll keep it for you when you need me." The second gift Zeus sent him was a strange-looking flying horse with great power, known as the King of Horses. Io came to him and told him that no human had ever ridden it before, and this was considered a great honor from Zeus. At that moment, they heard sounds, and when they went towards them, they found Acrisius killing soldiers. He was very powerful because of the strength he had received from Hades. He knocked Perseus down and was about to kill him, but the soldiers surrounded him and cut off his hand, so he fled into the desert. When they followed him, the surprise was that giant scorpions emerged from where his blood had fallen. With great difficulty, after many casualties, they killed 2 of them, but they were shocked to find that the scorpions they faced were just babies. Even larger scorpions appeared, and they couldn't be confronted. At the last moment, a group of jinn appeared and, with magic, controlled the scorpions and tamed them. Perseus was poisoned by a scorpion sting and fell to the ground, on the verge of death. Meanwhile, in the city, chaos erupted, and everyone prepared for the end of the world. There was a madman from the rabble who incited the people and convinced them to sacrifice the king's daughter to the Kraken instead of dying. We returned to Perseus, where the poison had spread, and Io couldn't help him. But one of the jinn intervened and used magic to heal him. They learned that all the jinn tribes were on their side and had been waiting for Perseus, who would free them from evil. Then they continued their journey towards the witches. On the way, Perseus saw a strange light pulling him towards it. They tried to ignore it and continued their way through the forest, but the light was so strange that he couldn't resist and kept walking towards it until he reached a place like a large cave. As he entered the cave, he found strange creatures before him, not humans. They were huge, and each of them held a bottle in their hand. They were the 3 witches. The soldiers felt fear and froze in their places, but Perseus felt something different. It was as if these creatures had been watching him for a long time. Suddenly, one of these creatures stood before him and spoke in a terrifying voice, telling him, "You are not like them. Half human, half god." Perseus was surprised and asked her, "Who are you, and what do you want from me?" She told him, "We know everything, and we can tell you how to kill the Kraken, but everything has a price." She smiled and turned her back on him, but Perseus managed to snatch one of their eyes and threatened to throw it off the mountain. He learned that the only way to defeat the Kraken was to face Medusa and bring her head. But the problem was that Medusa was very powerful, and just looking at her would turn you to stone. This was a mission from which no one had ever returned safely. But Perseus realized that he had no other choice, so he decided to lead the soldiers and go to Medusa. A little later, we see them begin their journey to the kingdom of the dead, the place where Medusa was. The road was difficult and dangerous, full of many monsters and enemies, but Perseus was determined to get Medusa's head to kill the Kraken and avenge his family. During his journey, Zeus himself appeared and offered him to come and live with him in Olympus and free him from these human wars because he was the son of a god. But Perseus refused and decided to continue his path. When Zeus found him determined, he gave him a golden coin and told him it would help him move through the kingdom of the dead and reach Medusa. Perseus continued his journey, and halfway, the soldiers began to lose hope, and many of them died in battles against the monsters they faced. But Perseus did not give up and continued with the remaining soldiers until they reached the kingdom of the dead, the place where Medusa was. But they needed something to get them there. The jinn with them took the coin from Perseus and threw it. Suddenly, a terrifying creature appeared with a chariot, and this coin was the bribe it took to take them. Io couldn't go with them because the place was forbidden for women, and she stayed waiting for him. They moved a little and arrived, facing the most dangerous challenge, entering Medusa's cave. It was very difficult to kill her, and they didn't know how. Anyone who looked at her turned to stone, to the point that she killed all of them, even the brave leader Draco. So he kept using his shield so as not to look into her eyes. At the moment Medusa was approaching him, he used her reflection on his shield to look at her without being frozen. In one moment, he drew his sword and cut off her head. At that time, Io was still waiting, worried about Perseus, and she was very happy when she saw him return with Medusa's head. Perseus was happy when he saw her, and it seemed like love, but their joy was short-lived. Acrisius appeared and stabbed Io in the back. At that moment, Perseus was heartbroken and turned on Acrisius, attacking him because he had killed his mother and his beloved, and he did not fault the enmity between him and Zeus. He used the sword that Zeus had sent him and kept striking him, and in the end, he defeated him. Now Perseus had Medusa's head, and all that remained was for him to return to Argos to face the Kraken. At that time, Zeus ordered Hades to unleash the Kraken, and indeed, Hades unleashed the Kraken on the city. It was a huge and terrifying monster, and the people revolted against the king and sacrificed the princess to leave them alone. At that time, in Olympus, Hades confessed to Zeus and told him that he had deceived him, and it was time for revenge. He told him that his power would weaken because humans had stopped worshipping him, while his power increased after freeing the Kraken. He told him to get ready because he would kill him. We returned to the Kraken, which was approaching the princess and was about to devour her, but Perseus arrived and threw Medusa's head on a high rock in front of the Kraken. As soon as the Kraken looked into her eyes, it froze and began to turn to stone until it became a large statue and was destroyed. But the princess fell into the sea. When he went to save her, Hades himself appeared to him, but he drew Zeus's sword and attacked him, stabbing him in the chest and defeating him. Then he jumped into the sea and managed to save the princess at the last moment. Then we see the princess offering to marry him and rule the kingdom in place of her father, who had died. But he refused the offer and left. Perseus was still hurt by what had happened to his family and his beloved Io, whom he had also been deprived of. He took his things and went to the place where Zeus's statue had been. There, Zeus appeared and thanked him for what he had done and offered him a second time to come and live with him on Olympus. But Perseus decided to stay among humans, who were his living family. So Zeus respected his decision and blessed him. But before he left, he gave him a surprise. He brought Io back to him so they could start a new life together. And so, Perseus avenged his family, saved humanity, and bravely faced his destiny. And the story ends.